I need to tell you something I've kept to myself for 5 years. I'm not the kind of person who shares much about my personal life. Honestly, I've had some health issues I'd rather not talk about. But the truth is, I don't know how much time I have left to tell this story, and it's been eating away at me. What happened out there in the woods is something I can't take to the grave without at least one other person knowing the truth. 5 years ago, I was an idiot. That's the simplest way to put it. Back then, I loved hiking. Still do, when I can, but I always felt the need to prove something to myself. I'd already done all the popular trails, the ones with signs and people passing by every 20 minutes. They felt too easy, too safe. I wanted something real, something that would push me. So I started looking for remote areas, places where you might not see another soul for days. That's why I planned a solo trip through a forest most people avoided. Not because it was especially dangerous, at least not on paper, but because it was remote and easy to get lost in. The kind of place where, if something went wrong, you'd be on your own for a long time before anyone even realized you were missing. I should have told someone where I was going. That's rule number 1, right? Always tell someone your route and when you'll be back. But I didn't. I was cocky, felt invincible. I had the gear, the experience, the confidence. I thought that was enough. The morning I set out, everything was perfect. Clear skies, about 60 degrees, with a light breeze. I started around 6 a.m., and for the first few hours, it was exactly what I wanted. The trail, if you could call it that, wound through thick forest, mostly Douglas fir and cedar, with sunlight breaking through the branches. Birds were singing, and I could hear water running somewhere in the distance. The air smelled of pine and earth. I felt alive again. That's the beauty of being alone in the wild. It washes away all the noise of daily life. No phone, no obligations, no small talk. Just you, nature, and the rhythm of your steps. I remember thinking how lucky I was to be there, to have found a place untouched by people. Around noon, I stopped for lunch, trail mix, jerky, a few protein bars. I found a fallen log near a small clearing and sat down to take in the view. The forest stretched endlessly in every direction, rolling green hills and distant mountain peaks. It was the kind of beauty that makes you feel small, but in a good way. After lunch, I kept going. The terrain grew steeper and rougher. I was climbing more than walking, pulling myself up by roots and rocks. My legs burned, but it felt great. I was pushing myself, testing my limits. Then I noticed the silence. It happened gradually, so I didn't realize it right away. But by around 3 p.m., I noticed I hadn't heard a bird in a long time. No rustling in the brush, no squirrels, nothing. The forest was completely still, just the sound of my breathing and footsteps. I stopped and listened. The silence was total, almost like a presence in itself. You know how nature always has some kind of background noise? Wind in the leaves, insects buzzing, birds calling. All of that was gone. It felt wrong. I told myself I was imagining it. Maybe I'd climbed high enough that the wildlife had changed, or maybe it was just the time of day. But deep down, I knew something was off. I stood there for a couple minutes, listening, trying to figure it out. That's when I saw them eyes staring at me from between 2 bushes, maybe 30 feet away. My heart jumped into my throat. I froze, trying to process what I was seeing. The eyes were low to the ground, amber-colored, unblinking, locked on me with a predator's focus. For a second, maybe less, we just stared at each other. Then everything happened at once. The thing burst from the brush, and I saw it, a mountain lion. A big one. It came at me so fast I barely had time to react. I've never felt anything like that kind of primal terror the moment you realize something is attacking you to kill you. I threw my arms up instinctively to protect my neck and face. The impact hit me like a truck. I'm not a small guy, about 6 feet, but it hit with enough force to nearly knock me over. Its claws tore into my forearm, burning pain shooting up my arm. But the adrenaline was so strong I barely felt it. I screamed, or maybe I roared, I can't remember. I just knew I couldn't go down. If I fell, I'd die. The mountain lion was trying to get past my arms, going for my throat. I could feel its breath on my face, smell the raw meat on its breath. Its teeth were inches from my neck. I shoved with everything I had left. The cat twisted and fought, trying to break free of my grip, but somehow I managed to push it away. It landed a few feet away, crouched low, eyes still locked on me. My gaze darted around until I spotted it a heavy branch on the ground a few feet to my left. I lunged for it, keeping my eyes on the cat, and grabbed it with both hands. It was about 4 feet long, thick enough to do some damage. I swung the branch like a club, shouting at the cat, trying to make myself look bigger and more dangerous than I really was. For a second, I thought it might actually work. The mountain lion hesitated, its ears flattened, lips curled, and it growled low in its throat. But then, I saw blood on its muzzle. My blood. Just a few drops from the gash on my arm, but that was enough. Once a predator tastes blood, everything changes. The lion began circling, muscles rippling under its coat, eyes locked on me as it searched for an opening. I kept the branch between us, turning with it as it moved, refusing to let it get around me. My mind was racing. I had to get out of there, but I couldn't turn my back. If I ran, it would be over in seconds. So I started backing up, slow and steady, never breaking eye contact. I had to make myself look like a hard target. The cat matched my pace, low to the ground, waiting for its chance. I could almost see it calculating, when should I strike? Where's the weakness? It felt like forever, but it probably lasted no more than a minute or two. Every muscle in my body was tense, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The branch grew heavier by the second, my arms trembling from the effort of holding it up, but I didn't dare lower it. I was so focused on the lion that I didn't realize where I was stepping until my heel found nothing but air. My stomach dropped. I glanced back for a split second and saw it. I'd backed right up to the edge of a cliff. Below me, 30 or 40 feet down, a river cut through a bed of rocks. I was trapped. Behind me was a deadly fall. In front of me was the lion, crouched now, its eyes fixed on me, ready for the final attack. I looked at it and knew I was about to die. I could see the power in its shoulders, the total lack of fear in its eyes. There was no way I could fight it off again. It was going to leap, and that would be it. My eyes darted to the river below. It was about 30 feet across, churning fast around the rocks. From up here, it looked dark, cold, and impossibly far. Then a terrible thought hit me. Maybe jumping was the better option. At least I'd have a chance. A small one, but still a chance. Facing that cat meant no chance at all. There was no time to think it through. The mountain lion's body tensed, crouching for the strike. In the brief heartbeat before it moved, I made my choice. I jumped. The cat lunged at the same instant, and I felt its claws snag my leg as I went over the edge. Then I was falling just air and terror. People say time slows down in moments like that, but it didn't. If anything, it sped up. The water rushed toward me, and I only had time to think one thing: this is going to hurt. Hitting water from that height isn't like diving into a pool. The surface doesn't give fast enough. It's like slamming into concrete. I hit the river and heard a crack so loud it seemed to fill the world. Pain exploded through my body, starting in my legs and shooting outward like lightning. It was the worst pain I've ever felt beyond anything I could imagine. I sank instantly. The current grabbed me, dragging me downstream. I tried to kick, tried to swim, but my legs wouldn't respond. They weren't just useless, they screamed in agony every time I tried to move them. Broken, my legs were broken, panic took over. I was underwater, being swept away, my legs dead weight. All I had left were my arms. I started clawing at the water, trying to pull myself up, fighting the current, my own weight, and the shock that was closing in around me. My lungs burned. I needed air desperately. I pulled harder, kicked once, and nearly blacked out from the pain. Don't kick, just use your arms. Pull, pull. My head finally broke the surface, and I gasped, sucking in air and water at the same time, coughing violently. I managed to keep my head above the surface for maybe 3 seconds before a wave crashed over me again. The river wasn't deep, but it was wild fast, brutal, tossing me against rocks like a rag doll. I came up again, choking, barely able to breathe. The current was too strong. Every time I tried to lift my head, it dragged me under again. I was drowning slowly, surely drowning. I don't know how long I fought, maybe 2 minutes, maybe 10. Time stopped meaning anything. Everything became brutally simple. Breathe, don't sink, survive the next second. Then my hand hit something solid. A vine or maybe a tree root hanging over the bank. I grabbed it with both hands and held on with everything I had. The river pulled, trying to tear me away, but I didn't let go. Inch by inch, hand over hand, I hauled myself toward the muddy bank. When I finally dragged myself out of the water, I collapsed. I lay there coughing, shaking uncontrollably, completely spent, but I was alive. Somehow, impossibly, I was still alive. Then I tried to stand. Pain ripped through my legs, sharp and deep, and I fell back down. I looked, and my stomach twisted. My right leg was bent at an angle no leg should bend. My left wasn't much better. I couldn't move either one without feeling like I was being torn apart. Both legs broken. That's when I started to cry. Not just from pain, though the pain was unbearable. I cried because I finally understood how bad this was. I was alone, miles from any trail, both legs shattered. Dusk was falling, the light was fading fast. I couldn't walk, couldn't signal for help, couldn't do anything but lie there on the cold, muddy riverbank, and I knew exactly what that meant. I'd spent enough time in the wilderness to know what happens when you can't move, can't make heat, can't defend yourself. Predators would find me, or I'd freeze. Maybe both. I tried to drag myself farther from the water, using my arms and elbows to crawl. Every movement sent lightning bolts of pain through my legs, but I kept going, maybe 15 feet. Then, I couldn't move anymore. The adrenaline was wearing off, and the pain came back in waves. I propped myself against a big tree trunk for cover. At least it gave me something solid at my back. I looked around for anything useful, something to defend myself with, something to start a fire, but all I could reach were wet leaves and small branches. The temperature was dropping fast. My clothes were soaked and clinging to me. As the sun disappeared, the cold began to creep in deep. I started to shiver. At first it was mild, then violent. My teeth chattered uncontrollably, my whole body shaking as if it were trying to break itself apart. So this is how it ends, I thought. Alone, broken, freezing to death. I'd been so stupid, so damn arrogant. I thought I had enough experience, enough preparation. But nature doesn't care how prepared you think you are. One mistake is all it takes. As night fell, I heard them. Wolves. Their howls echoed through the forest, distant, but clear. Maybe miles away, maybe closer. Each cry sent ice through my veins. Wolves hunt at night. They can smell blood from far away. How long before they caught my scent? I found a thick branch nearby, heavy enough to swing if I had to. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it was all I had. I laid it across my lap and waited, shivering in the dark, listening. That's when I heard something else. A scream. Not a wolf, not a mountain lion. Something different, something huge and primal that seemed to shake the air itself. It came from far away, but it didn't sound like any animal I'd ever heard. Then it came again, closer this time. And after that, I heard footsteps. They weren't the light, padded steps of a wolf or the silent, stalking tread of a cat. These footsteps were heavy, deliberate. Something big was moving through the forest, coming straight toward me. The sound grew louder, branches snapping, brush being shoved aside. Whatever it wasn't trying to be quiet. I tightened my grip on the stick. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. The steps were close now, right on the other side of the tree I was leaning against. Then I heard it breathing, deep, heavy breaths. And I caught a smell, musky, animal-like. But unlike anything I'd ever known, I had to see what it was. I couldn't just sit there and wait. Hands trembling, I shifted my weight against the tree, inching myself around just enough to look. What I saw made me scream. It was standing no more than 10 feet away, and it was enormous. At least 7 feet tall, maybe more, covered in dark, almost black hair, massive shoulders, long arms. The moonlight caught its eyes, and they glowed back at me with an eerie, unnatural reflection. A Bigfoot. I was looking at an actual Bigfoot. I know how that sounds. I know what people think when they hear that word. But I'm telling you exactly what I saw, and it was real. There's no other way to describe it. I screamed until my throat burned. Sheer terror flooded me. But the creature didn't attack. It didn't charge. It didn't even move. It just stood there, staring at me, not with anger or hunger, but curiosity. The kind of curiosity you'd have looking at a frightened animal trapped in a corner. After what felt like forever, it moved. Slowly, carefully. It crouched down, lowering itself closer to the ground. Then it sat right there in the dirt, maybe 8 feet away, still watching me. I didn't know what to do. Every instinct screamed at me to get away, but my legs were useless. All I could do was push myself backward with my hands, dragging my broken legs behind me. Each movement sent a fresh wave of agony through my body, but I didn't care. I had to get distance between us. I made it maybe 3 feet before I had to stop, gasping from the pain. I looked back, expecting it to be on top of me, but it wasn't. It hadn't moved. It was still sitting there, head tilted slightly to one side, as if trying to figure me out. We stayed like that for what felt like an eternity. I was shaking uncontrollably, freezing, barely thinking straight. Then the creature made a sound. Not a scream this time, but something softer. A low, drawn-out noise, almost like a moan or a sigh. Then it stood. My body went rigid. I clutched the stick tighter, ready for the end, but it didn't come closer. Instead, it turned away and disappeared into the trees. I could hear its footsteps fading into the distance. I sat there, dazed and terrified. What had just happened? Was it coming back? Was it circling around? I waited, listening. The forest was quiet again, except for the river and the distant howl of wolves. Maybe 15 minutes passed. My fingers had gone numb from the cold. Then I heard footsteps again. It was coming back. The creature emerged from the tree line, carrying something. It took me a few seconds to recognize it in the dim light. Large branches, still covered in leaves. It approached slowly. I pressed myself against the tree, bracing for the worst. But once again, it didn't come right up to me. Instead, it stopped about 6 feet away and began arranging the branches. It was building something. Piece by piece, it leaned the branches against a fallen log, layering them carefully to form a kind of windbreak, a makeshift shelter. I watched in stunned silence as this massive being worked methodically, almost gently. Its huge hands moved with purpose, precise and deliberate. When it finished, the creature looked at me, then at the shelter, then back again. The message was clear, but I couldn't move. I was too weak, too cold, too broken. I tried to gesture with my legs, to show it I couldn't walk, though I had no idea if it understood. It seemed to consider this. Then, for the first time, it moved toward me. Every muscle in my body locked up as it approached slowly, cautiously, as though it didn't want to frighten me. When it got close, it crouched again, this time right beside me. Up close, the details were overwhelming. Its fur was thick, coarse, dark as midnight. The face was flatter than an ape's, but still not human. And the eyes, those eyes were intelligent. That's what struck me most. There was intelligence in those eyes and something else too, maybe concern. The creature reached out one massive hand. I flinched, but it only brushed gently against my leg, the broken one. I gasped in pain, and it immediately pulled back, letting out a soft, low sound, almost like an apology. Then, carefully, it slid one arm under my back and the other beneath my knees. I realized what it was about to do just before it did it. It lifted me effortlessly as if I weighed nothing at all. The movement sent sharp waves of pain through my legs, and I cried out, but the creature held me securely. It carried me to the shelter it had built and, with remarkable care, laid me down inside. The structure blocked the wind right away. Just being shielded from that freezing air helped, but the creature wasn't done. It disappeared again into the dark, then returned with piles of dry leaves and pine needles, packing them around me like insulation. After that, it gathered several thick branches and snapped them barehanded. The sound of the wood breaking echoed like gunshots. It stacked the pieces near me. It was building a fire. The creature vanished once more, and I lay there, dazed, trying to comprehend what was happening. A Bigfoot, an actual Bigfoot, was taking care of me. The idea was insane, but it was happening right before my eyes. When it returned, it carried something that smelled strong and resinous. It knelt beside the pile of wood and I saw what it had brought, dry birch bark, perfect for kindling. It also had 2 stones. I watched as it struck them together, sparks flashing between its huge fingers. It took several tries, but finally, one tiny spark caught on the bark, and a small flame flickered to life. The creature bent close, blowing gently, feeding the fire with twigs until it grew into a steady flame. Warmth spread through the shelter, and I nearly cried again, this time from relief. I'd been so cold I could barely feel my limbs. The fire was small but steady, protected from the wind by the makeshift walls. The creature positioned itself at the entrance, lying across the opening like a living barrier. It sat facing outward, into the darkness, guarding. At some point, I must have drifted off. When I opened my eyes, morning light filtered through the branches overhead. The fire had burned down, but the air inside was still faintly warm. My body was stiff, every muscle aching, and my legs throbbed so badly I felt sick. The creature was gone. Panic rose in my chest. Had it left me? Was I alone again? Then I heard footsteps and it returned, carrying something in its arms. As it drew closer, I saw what it held: fish. Several of them, still fresh, likely caught from the river. It placed them beside the cold fire pit and began roasting them with the same patient care it had shown the night before. When they were done, it laid the fish on flat stones near the embers. It was cooking for me. While the fish sizzled, it left again and came back with something else. A thick, curved piece of bark filled with water. It held it carefully as it approached, setting it within my reach. I stared at the water, then at the creature. It gestured toward the bark, then to me. I reached out, picked it up, and drank. The water was cold and clean, and only then did I realize how desperately thirsty I was. I drained the makeshift cup in seconds. The creature made a low hum, almost a pleased sound, and checked the fish. When it decided they were ready, it lifted one gently and placed it on a strip of bark beside me. I ate it, and it was the best thing I'd ever tasted. Not because it was perfectly cooked, it wasn't. Parts were burnt, others half raw, but because I was starving, freezing, and alive. That became our routine. Each day, the creature would leave at dawn, bringing back food and water. It kept the fire going. It watched over me at night. When I needed to relieve myself, it would lift me gently, carefully, and carry me a little ways from the shelter, then bring me back afterward. The creature was astonishingly clean. It rinsed the fish in the river before cooking. It kept the shelter tidy, cleared away debris, and maintained the space around the fire. There was a strange, almost methodical precision in how it arranged things. I found myself studying it, trying to understand. One afternoon, while I was eating some berries it had brought, I caught it watching me, not in a threatening way, but with quiet curiosity, as if fascinated by how differently I did things. When I finished, I held up the bark bowl it had made and said softly, "Thank you." The creature tilted its head, studying me. Then it tapped one huge finger against the bowl, producing a soft, drum-like sound. It did it again, and again. It was trying to communicate. So I tapped the same rhythm back. Its eyes widened, slightly surprised maybe, and it made a low, pleased sound. Then it stood, walked to a nearby tree, snapped off a small branch, and returned. It placed the stick in my hand, picked up its own, and began tapping a pattern on a fallen log. It wanted me to join in. So I did. There we sat, a massive wild being and a broken, half-frozen hiker beating sticks against wood in rhythm. It was both absurd and beautiful. The creature would tap a sequence and I'd try to copy it. When I got it right, it let out a soft whooping sound, almost a cheer. That became part of our routine. It seemed to enjoy these moments of connection. Sometimes it would bring me small objects, a smooth stone, an unusual leaf, a piece of bark with intricate lines. It would turn them over in its hands, showing me, watching my reaction closely. I began talking to it more. I didn't expect answers, but it seemed to listen. I told it about the pain in my legs, about my fears, about the life I'd left behind. The creature would sit at the entrance of the shelter, facing outward, but I could tell it was paying attention. Sometimes it would glance back at me, those intelligent eyes flickering with firelight. On the second night, I heard the wolves again, closer this time. From their howls, I could tell they'd caught a scent, probably mine. The creature heard them too. It stood, walked to the edge of the shelter, and released a roar that shook me to my bones. The wolves fell silent. I didn't hear them again. But about an hour later, another sound came from the darkness. Not wolves, something bigger. The creature grew tense, and my heart began to race. It stepped out into the moonlight, placing itself between me and whatever was out there. Then I heard it, a low growl, answered by another, deeper one. But the second growl didn't come from my protector. There was another one out there, another Bigfoot. My creature roared back, louder, angrier. Branches snapped. Heavy footsteps circled the clearing. Then came a new sound, something between a growl and a shout. They were communicating. At first it sounded hostile, deep, guttural rumbles and chest-beating thuds. But slowly, the tone shifted. Softer, less aggressive. Then silence. After what felt like forever, the other one left. My creature returned to the shelter and lay down at the entrance, but it was unsettled. It kept glancing toward the trees, alert, uneasy. "Was that your friend?" I whispered. "Or something else?" It looked back at me and I swear I saw something in its expression. Worry, maybe. Or confusion about what the other's presence meant. The next morning, it was different, more cautious. It disappeared for longer stretches and, when it came back, scanned the forest carefully before approaching the shelter. Something had changed. That afternoon, it brought me something new. Not food medicine, or at least that's what I think it was. A handful of sharp-smelling minty leaves. It crushed them in its palms, added a little water, and made a thick paste. Then it pointed to my leg. I nodded, not knowing what else to do. It carefully lifted the splint and spread the mixture over the swollen, bruised skin. At first it burned, then cooled, then numbed. The pain eased almost instantly. Where had it learned that? Was this knowledge passed down among its kind, the way humans share herbal remedies? Or had it discovered it on its own, trial and error, instinct, experience? I watched it work, amazed at how gentle those enormous hands could be. When it was done, it replaced the splints and secured them again with careful precision. Then it did something that completely broke me. It rested a hand on my shoulder just for a moment and gave a soft squeeze, a gesture of comfort, of reassurance. "Thank you," I whispered, my throat tight. "I don't know what I did to deserve this, but thank you." It made a low rumbling sound from deep in its chest, something like a cat's purr, but heavier. Then it returned to its place at the entrance. That night, fever hit me hard. The cold, the injuries, the exhaustion, all of it finally hit me at once. I shivered uncontrollably, drifting in and out of consciousness, half dreaming, half delirious. I remember the creature moving beside me, placing its massive hand on my forehead. It was so large it covered most of my head, and it was warm, incredibly warm. Then it left, only to return with more water. It helped me drink, lifting my head carefully. When I couldn't keep my eyes open any longer, I felt it lie down beside me, close enough that its body heat seeped into mine. That warmth probably saved my life that night. When I woke the next morning, the fever had broken. I was weak, but my mind was clear. The creature was already awake, tending the fire. When it saw me stir, it brought water and a roasted root for me to eat. The root was bitter, but filling. As I ate, I noticed it gathering the remaining fish, wrapping them in large leaves, and tying them together with vines. It was preparing supplies. "We're leaving?" I asked softly. It looked at me, then toward the forest. It made a gesture pointing into the distance, then at me, then at itself. I understood. It meant to take me out of here. On the third morning, I woke to find it sitting closer than usual, watching me intently. When I opened my eyes, it stood and went to the fire, adjusting the wood as if deep in thought. Then it turned toward me and made a sound I'd never heard before. It wasn't quite a growl, not quite a word, but something in between. It pointed at itself, patted its chest, and repeated the sound. Was it saying its name, or just making noise? I couldn't tell, but I tried to mimic the sound anyway. Its eyes widened slightly, surprised, and it nodded, actually nodded, and repeated the sound again, clearer this time. Then it pointed at me, tilting its head in question. I understood. It wanted to know my name. I pointed to myself and said it out loud. The creature tried to repeat it, but the sound came out rough and distorted. It tried again, grew frustrated, then gave a small dismissive wave of its hand. Instead, it made a different noise whenever it looked at me, a low, soft rumble that almost sounded affectionate. I started responding to it, and that became my name in whatever language this being spoke. That afternoon, something happened that changed everything. The creature had gone to fetch water, and I was alone by the fire when I heard footsteps. For a moment, I thought it was coming back, but these steps were lighter, cautious. A young deer stepped into the clearing, probably drawn by the scent of the river. It was small, maybe a year old, and hadn't noticed me yet. My stomach growled. I was starving, and the fish portions hadn't been much. If only I could catch that deer. But of course I couldn't. I couldn't even stand, let alone hunt. I just watched as it wandered closer to the shelter until it finally spotted me. We locked eyes for a moment, both frozen, then it bolted. The creature returned a few minutes later and instantly froze. It had caught the scent. It looked at me, then at the deer tracks in the soft earth, then back at me again. It made a questioning sound. I pointed toward where the deer had run. It studied the tracks for a long moment, then shook its head. It gestured something like too small or not worth it. Then it handed me the water it had brought. An hour later, I heard movement in the forest again. Heavy, deliberate. The creature returned, dragging something behind it. Not the deer. A wild boar, dead, killed cleanly. It had gone hunting. For me, that night, we had more meat than I'd seen in weeks. The creature carefully prepared the boar, cooking a portion for me while eating its share raw. As we ate beside the fire, I realized something that stopped me cold. It wasn't just keeping me alive out of instinct or obligation. It cared for me. By the third day, the creature did something unexpected. It came close while I was eating the berries it had brought and pointed to my legs, then to itself, then down at the ground. I didn't understand at first. It repeated the motion, more firmly this time. Pointed at my leg, pointed at itself, gestured downward. Then it tapped my arm. It wanted to see my injuries. I nodded, unsure what else to do. The creature knelt beside me, examining both legs with surprising gentleness. It barely touched me, just looked, muttering low, rhythmic sounds I couldn't decipher. Soft grunts and hums that seemed more like self-talk than communication. Then it left the shelter. When it returned, it carried several long, straight branches and a bundle of vines. I watched as it carefully positioned the branches along my legs, using them as splints, then bound them tightly with the vines. It knew exactly what it was doing. Somehow, this being understood basic first aid. When it finished, my legs were immobilized. It wasn't perfect, far from professional, but it kept them steady. The pain still flared with every heartbeat, but at least the bones no longer shifted. That night, as we sat by the fire, I found myself talking to it. I didn't expect an answer. I just needed to hear a voice, even if it was my own. "Thank you," I whispered. "I don't know why you're helping me, but thank you. Without you, I'd be dead." The creature turned its head, eyes glowing in the firelight. It made a soft, sigh-like sound, then looked back out into the forest. "Do you understand me?" I asked quietly. "Can you understand what I'm saying?" No response, just a small tilt of the head. "I'm sorry," I said after a long silence. "For everything, for being here, for intruding. I know this is your home. I didn't mean to cause trouble." It shifted slightly but didn't turn toward me again. Still, I kept talking, half to it, half to myself. I told it about my life, why I'd come out here, how stupid I'd been. I told it about the health problems I'd ignored, the arrogance that made me think I was invincible, and how nature had proven me wrong in the harshest way possible. The creature gave no sign of understanding, but somehow I felt it was listening. On the fourth day, it lifted me. I was dozing beside the fire when it approached, and without a word, gently scooped me up. Before I could react, it had placed me over its shoulder like a child. My splinted legs hung down across its chest, held firmly but carefully. Then it began to walk. The movement was surprisingly smooth. The creature walked with steady, deliberate steps, one massive hand keeping my legs balanced. Sometimes I ducked under low branches, but mostly I just clung to it, trying not to think about how surreal it all was. It carried me for hours. The forest shifted as we traveled streams, ridges, dense undergrowth. The creature moved tirelessly, never stumbling, never slowing. Sometimes it stopped to give me water, but it always pressed on with a sense of direction, as if it knew exactly where we were going. By late afternoon, I began to hear something distant voices, human voices. The creature heard them too. It stopped, crouched, and gently set me down behind a clump of bushes. Then it looked at me, and I swear I saw something in its eyes, something like farewell. "Wait," I said, my voice breaking, but it was already backing away. Moments later, The voices grew closer. Now I could hear them clearly, hikers talking about trail markers and camp spots. "Help," I screamed. "Help me." The voices stopped. Then came the sound of running footsteps crashing through the brush. "Over here!" I yelled. "I'm hurt!" 3 hikers burst through the trees and froze when they saw me. Shock, confusion, a dozen questions at once. Who was I? What happened? How long had I been out here? I told them I'd fallen, broken my legs, and somehow survived on my own. I didn't mention the mountain lion. I didn't mention the river, and I sure as hell didn't mention it. They radioed for help on a satellite phone, and a rescue team arrived a few hours later. As they lifted me onto the stretcher, I looked back toward the tree line just once. The forest was still, quiet, but for a heartbeat, I thought I saw movement. A dark shape watching from the shadows, and then it was gone. They set my legs properly, loaded me onto a stretcher, and finally lifted me into a helicopter bound for the hospital. Both legs had been badly broken, just as I suspected. I needed surgery, pins, rods, the whole works. Recovery took months. Now I can walk again, mostly fine, but my legs ache whenever it rains and I carry a few deep scars as reminders. The doctors were astonished that I'd survived 4 days alone in the wilderness with injuries like that. They asked how I stayed warm, how I found water, how I managed to reach the place where the hikers found me. I lied. I told them I must have been delirious, that I didn't remember much. I didn't mention the shelter, or the fire, or the fish, or the creature that carried me on its shoulder like a child. I've never gone back to that area. Part of me wants to find it, to thank it properly. But a larger part of me knows I should leave it alone. It helped me when I needed it most, and maybe the best way to repay that kindness is to respect its privacy. I've thought about that creature every day for the past 5 years. I've tried to understand why it helped me. The most reasonable explanation I can come up with is that it saw me as helpless, in pain, and something deep inside it, some buried sense of empathy, couldn't let me die. Maybe that's why they're so hard to find. They're not vicious or dangerous. They're cautious, intelligent. They stay away from us because they've learned that's the safest thing to do. But when they come across someone truly defenseless, maybe their instinct isn't to harm, but to help. Or maybe I just got lucky. Maybe I crossed paths with the one Bigfoot on Earth who felt some strange compassion for a foolish hiker who thought he was invincible. I don't know. I'll never know. But I do know this. I owe my life to something that isn't supposed to exist. Something that showed me more kindness and mercy than I probably deserved. That's why I had to tell this story. Because I'm not young anymore, and my health isn't what it used to be, and I couldn't bear the thought of this dying with me. Someone else needs to know what happened out there. Someone else needs to understand that there are things in the wild we can't explain, and maybe, just maybe, some of them are better than we are. 5 years ago, I was a fool. I went into the woods alone, unprepared for what could go wrong, certain that I had enough experience to handle anything. I paid for that arrogance with 2 broken legs and 4 days of agony. But I learned something. I learned that the world is stranger than we imagine. That sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places. That I'm not the man I thought I was. That I needed to be humbled to admit how fragile and small I really am. And I learned that somewhere out there, deep in those forests, there's a creature that may have saved my life, expecting nothing in return. A being that fed me, protected me, and carried me to safety. I don't expect you to believe me. Honestly, I'm not sure I'd believe it myself if I heard someone else tell this story. But it's true. Every word of it. And now it's been told. Whatever happens to me, whatever becomes of my health or my years left, at least I know the story won't die with me. At least I know that somewhere, someone will read these words and wonder. Maybe even believe. And that's all I've ever wanted.